So let's talk about Moneyball, and I want to draw three conclusions from Moneyball. One, I think the characteristics that we can learn from Billy Beane is that when you look at the conventional wisdom, that sometimes it's wrong. And so persisting in the conventional wisdom only sends you down a wrong path with the rest of your competitors. The next is that as useful as our gut instincts may be, I think stats are almost always better. And so we want to look at some statistics and see what we can learn from them and how we can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our marketing investments. And then lastly, Billy and the Oakland A's gained competitive advantage. They won more games because they were willing to think differently. That was not without its internal pain to the organization, but in the long run, they flourished because they were willing to think differently. So this is one of my favorite pictures from the movie, and this represents that period when Billy Beane was explaining to the scouts that some kid with a computer was going to start helping these guys select players. And their opinions of whether the potential player had the look of a baseball player was going to be subjugated to some performance statistics, and they weren't even the performance statistics that these guys were all used to dealing with. It was going to be this new metric of getting on base and getting other players on base. Now, another factor, the finances always come into things, and Billy Beane's budget as against the New York Yankees was, you know, pennies to dollars. And so he had to do whatever he did. He had less to invest, and yet he had to win more games. And ultimately, he won games for pennies as against millions of dollars relative to the New York Yankees. When I talk to you today, I want you to understand that I'm a metrics-driven person, and if I could show you my little calculator that I almost always have with me, it's because I love numbers and I believe in numbers, and not that stats can't sometimes be misleading, but I think that in the absence of statistics, we are on more uncertain ground. And so Real Patient Ratings was formed at the end of 2011, and we launched our consumer site in March 2012. We gained Google stars in September of 2012. We were endorsed by the American Society of Plastic Surgery in the fall of 2012, and then just last month, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons became the first society specialty that published ratings and reviews for consumers. And so we have had patients complete just over 20,000 surveys. There were more than 1 million questions answered by within these 20,000 surveys, and we've posted almost 13,000 plastic surgery reviews, more than any other site in the world. And when I say let's go do something in our practice, I always want patient input in order to do that. While the doctor's opinion is important, and my opinion as a practice manager is important, and even the employees on the front line who are getting insights into the patient's needs, obviously their views are important as well. But none of our views are as focused or as helpful to us as those by simply asking. And I've been asking in our practice for 25 years. And I have had a lot of insights and made many, many changes in our practice as a result of patient feedback. And so let's go and see what we can learn from our patients. There are a lot of similarities between baseball and the practice of cosmetic surgery, and that may seem totally counterintuitive, but both are process-oriented, both are statistics-driven, and both use data to define strategies to win. And if you think about, hitting a home run, even hitting the ball out of the park, the player must go around the bases. They just don't jump up and down on home plate. And even if we have a former patient or someone call and virtually schedule surgery over the phone, what we might call a home run, that patient still must make an appointment, have a consult and be evaluated, schedule surgery, and complete surgery. So there are parallels here that I hope it will help you to think about as we move through this. Now, what is an at-bat in this analogy? Which is, if we consider the lead, the at-bat, it's an opportunity to start moving us toward having a completed surgery. It's a start moving around those bases. And as in baseball, there are metrics of runs batted in and all kinds of metrics about performance. We have those as well in our practices. Now, one of the metrics that I think is most useful to follow is the lead to surgery. And in this case, I'm talking about email leads. And this data I received from Ryan Miller at Aetna Interactive, who says that the average email to surgery capture rates is 13.2%. So if 100 patients called, obviously we're going to operate on 13. Now, in my own practice, we are doing better than that, about 50% better than that, which is 18.5. But if we go to the experts and we say, where are the best practices? And I ask both Ryan Miller and Enrique Rangel from MyMed Leads, and they both have a very, very few but stellar practices functioning in this mid-range of the mid-20s. So these practices are doing twice as many surgeries from the same opportunity as the average practice, and they're doing 50% more than our practice is doing from the same number of leads. And of course, for me, I'm always trying to monetize the value of our investments in terms of both money and effort. And this is always what I'm advising everyone else. And so if knowing this number and getting this number computed for you to know what is that percent of emails that turn into surgery. It's a very, very important number to know, and then to see if you can influence it. And so what this does is how effectively we take these leads, move them around the bases, as it were, and get them to surgery. It increases the return that we have on our investments. And they're just going to give you a couple tips here on email protocols. I think it's, I was talking to Karen Zupko a day or two ago, and she had just done a test of a group of practices, and she had sent out emails to a number of practices. And she said the majority of practices had not responded in 72 hours, which if you, I can't imagine they're even at 13% if that's how they're handling their email contacts. So in my own practice, a contact us form, because we're a larger practice and multiple people answer emails, then it goes to a public folder. Copies go to our head patient coordinator who assigns them. Monday we come into quite a few, so we try to get all those answered within 2 hours, and we try to turn within the business day, we try to return emails within an hour. Now there are statistics out there, and if you say, well, why aren't you doing 27% instead of 18%? There are statistics out there that say that the highest return is going to be if you answer an email within 10 minutes. And so that involves really having your technology in order. You have to know an email arrives in real time, and you have to deal with it instantly because the return on that instant response will be so much higher. And then one of the things that I do is I do receive a blind copy of each email response, and I'm able to look at what time we received that email and then when we responded to it. When you're responding, just here's a couple tips. You want to have an interesting subject line. We end up putting "thank you for contacting our practice name," because people go and leave emails and they don't even remember where they've left them. You don't want to be doing auto text and these long, complicated responses that don't have any relationship to what the patient's asking about. You want procedure-specific responses, relatively short. You want to try and get them on the phone, obviously, would be your first goal. Give them a link to some portion of the site that's relevant, and we often link to our review content. And then one call to action: please call me, please do something to try and move this from written to an actual personal communication. So let's move now on to the issue of stats, and I want to give you one example of where data can really help you make a change in outcomes. And here's the kid who was the Harvard MBA with the computer. And the important thing about statistics is they don't only enable you to measure performance, but to define strategy. And especially if you're using different metrics than other people, then that may well give you a competitive advantage. And in just, again, using this baseball analogy, the Oakland A's had a period of time where they were the only team using the statistics that Billy Beane was focusing on. And likewise, we can find things within our performance or in our patient or customer relationships that will give us competitive advantage. And so we're always looking for those. So my bias is we start by getting the only opinion that matters. And we're all busy and we all have limited amounts of time to apply to new ideas, new strategies, or extending our efforts in any way. So if we're going to do that, then we really want to focus on the ones that are important and focus on those in descending order. And ideally, what's going to give us the most bang for our buck in terms of effort and time and expense. In baseball, everyone's stats are known to everyone else. And I actually think if you're competing against another team and knowing who has what statistics helps you in the chance to win against that team. So what our industry was missing was the ability to benchmark ourselves in real time. And really, we were pretty weak in the whole area of studies about what's important to patients and ways that we can use those to help our very small specialty flourish in its David against Goliath battle with other specialties. And so the benchmarking is extremely important. And so you can look at yourself as against last period, as against the entire system, and you can find areas of, you're going to certainly find areas of success, and you're also going to find areas of opportunity to increase your performance. Once you identify areas where you want to improve, then the question is, how much is that going to impact, or what is it going to impact? And the number one thing we're looking in a consult analysis would be to increase conversions of consultation. And the number one thing that we're looking for in a post-op analysis is to increase recommendations. And in both of these cases, we're taking our existing marketing expense, our existing marketing efforts, and we're trying to increase the return on those efforts and investment. Now, we've completed 2 major studies, the largest studies in plastic surgery of which I'm aware. And we completed a consult study. I'm going to report on both of these to you, of 2,700 consult patients and what were their key drivers of likelihood to schedule. And then almost 7,200 post-op patients and what were their key drivers of likelihood to recommend. So at consult, what do we want? We want more patients who are good candidates to schedule surgery. And we actually all do very well already. This is looking at about 100 practices in these 2,700 patients, and 78% of their patients were highly satisfied with their consultation and had a corresponding likelihood to schedule just over 50% overall. But among those practices was also 1 patient in 5 who was only satisfied, who had much lower likelihood to schedule, and who, if we understood what were her concerns and what things really drove her, we could double the likelihood to schedule for 1 out of 5 patients, which turns out to be a pretty significant number for most of our practices. So what we want to ask now is, what do you think is the number one driver of likelihood to schedule a consultation? Just give us a guess, and then I'll tell you what the patients had to say.
So the poll is open. If you want to come vote, I'll leave it open for about 30 seconds. I think I might have changed the question a little from what Marie said, but we have 50% have voted, 60. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close that.
Okay, and tell us what everybody thinks.
So the results were that 57% believe the friendliness and warmth of the surgeon is the most important. 43% said easy to understand. Nobody said tall, dark, and handsome. And nobody said thoroughness of medical history. And nobody said medical procedure info given at consult.
Okay, so I'm with the 57% who would have said, how are we doing here? If we had another glitch with
I think just Put it back in presenter mode and you'll be fine.
Okay, I'm in presenter mode over here for the reasons. Okay, let's see if we can get it to go forward. Okay, so here, to my absolute surprise, that I'm with the 57% who would have said it was the warmth and friendliness of the physician. I was absolutely certain that was the top driver. In fact, the top driver is the medical information provided by the surgeon at consultation. Now, in our own practice, what happened was that we had, at the time, we had 4 physicians, and we had 2 with high scores on medical procedure information and 2 with scores about 10 points lower. And both of the doctors who had the lower scores did not realize that this was important to patients. They were certainly not maliciously trying to do something that would reduce their conversion rates. And so both made changes in their consultations once they knew about this top driver. And as it happened, we already owned TouchMD, and we were only one of our physicians was using it very well. And so once we knew this is the #1 driver, then we adjusted and got TouchMD in and tried to improve our performance on this top driver. Now, I'm going to take you through the top drivers here, and we'll look at them as they relate to each of the groups within the practice. So of the top drivers, there were 4 for surgeon, and you can see their relative ranking there. So the second most important driver related to surgeons was the thorough medical history, as Eva indicated. And this score was actually even lower at the time. And what we found was that patients really dislike filling out medical histories. And they generally take them a long time. And if they're in a consult process where they're evaluating several surgeons, there's no master medical history, so they're filling them out repeatedly. And what we think was happening in most cases is the patient filled that out, the doctor looked at it in front of the patient in about 30 seconds, may or may not have addressed anything, said you're fine, but it was just an irritant. So we began to advise that the physician look at the medical history prior to entering the room, determine in advance if they had any concerns. When they came to the medical history portion of their consultation, then to say, I reviewed your medical history prior to coming in the room. Thank you very much for taking the time to complete that. I know that it is a nuisance, but it is something I really use in order to be able to give appropriate information to you and help you achieve your goals. So these scores then began to come up around the country once we started suggesting this as a process. Showed interest in questions and concerns. People are doing pretty well here, but there are people up in the 90s as well on this question. So, and then easy to understand. This is as simple as speaking English, not medicalese, and keeping language in relatively simple word links and sentence links. Now the nurse driver, not every one of you has a nurse. I personally believe that nurse is as important as the physician in the consultation. Patients bond with them. They trust them. They're the most trusted person in the practice. And so the nurse's role is not a minor one. It is not just a chaperone. It's a real participant and partner in the team. So The number 2 driver was that information the nurse provided prior to the surgeon entering the room. And this is a trust message, which this is a good doctor, a nice person, easy to talk to. Whatever the good things that can be said about the doctor, this is a safe, we've practiced in a very safe way. I'm proud to be here. I've been a member of this staff for 10 years or whatever. I am his patient or her patient, my friends and family, my coworkers. It's just a trust message that helps a consumer. And then again, the consumer's looking for the nurse to provide procedure information and the nurse to show respect for the patient. And then the staff and process drivers, you can see their relative importance to the patient. And something you will see with the post-op data as well is that initial appointment has a lot of impact on the decision to schedule surgery. And so having a strong, successful initial call, having appointments at a good available times, all will lead to an increase in likelihood to schedule. Now, this is looking at why do we care about patients, and this is just helping you look at how overall satisfaction at consultation is related to revenue. So we looked at a number of practices who had about 70% satisfaction, highly satisfied patients at consultation, and we found their average scheduling rate to be 49%. So presuming they had 600 consults, an average fee of $6,000, that practice would have a revenue of about 117 on those 600 consults. But if the satisfaction was 5% higher, there was a corresponding increase in likelihood to schedule of almost the exact same amount, and suddenly a practice that is a 1.7 practice is almost a 1.9 practice. And so these small increments of increases in satisfaction and increases in scheduling rates can be very significant because of the multiplier effect. So now we'll look at referrals and the post-op study of 7,200 patients. And again, what we see here is we almost double likelihood to recommend when we create highly satisfied patients rather than just satisfied patients. The other thing we're showing you here is the percentage of those patients who approve their survey to be converted into ratings and review content and their comments to be included as a part of that conversion to ratings and review. And you can see highly satisfied patients, 97% of them approve their comments and reviews to be posted. This is on the practice's website and on RealPatientRatings.com. While the satisfied patient, that drops to 56%. And you see over here the I'm going the wrong direction. Let me get over here. The highly dissatisfied patient, they have a higher likelihood to comment also. So it's very good that our very happy patients, of which we have many more, are much more likely to share their comments. And then this is looking at the drivers of likelihood to recommend. Now, I want to point out to you here that these are almost all drivers of care and communication. And the question was asked about overall satisfaction with their surgical experience. This is not a question about their surgical result. And the top drivers, number 1 and number 2, were about post-op communication and contact, and the second about post-op being informed about recovery. And if you are looking at your practice and say, I don't like the percent of retention we have, I think it's too low, or I don't like the percent of referrals, it sends me back again and again through that marketing morass to try and buy more new patients because I'm not earning the patients that I'm moving through our care system, then this would give you a direct project that you could do to improve patient satisfaction with post-op communication and contact, and making sure that they are informed about recovery, and less importantly, but still within the top 10, understanding who to contact for information. Of the human drivers, there are only 4, and they're looking for respect from the physician, that the nurse is listening carefully, that they have access to information through this process from the patient coordinator, and overall that their impression of the entire team, including this is staff, is that there is an organized and coordinated care system that makes them feel comfortable and part of a professional experience. And then lastly, we have some pre-surgery drivers, and this parallels the importance of the initial call to consult success, and this is the importance of the pre-op to ultimately having high levels of referrals. And so the patients are looking for the pre-op visit to help them do more than consign consents. They actually want to feel at the end of that they are prepared mentally for surgery. And actually in my own practice, despite having developed the pre-op books that have now been used by millions of patients, we had pretty ragged results on this topic. And so we actually have added a question at the end of the pre-op. Now tell me how you feel at the end of all this information. Do you feel like you have what you need to prepare yourself mentally for surgery? And if the answer at that point is no, then what we're going to do is stop, not consider that pre-op completed, and we're going to see what else they feel they need in order to be able to answer that question positively. Their assessment of the usefulness of pre-op material. And you can say, we need consents legally, but how are consents only going to help them prepare or go through the surgical process? And then in that pre-surgical period, what is their assessment of the quality, helpfulness of the communication they received? Again, falling pretty high. And I could even add this to the pre-op list, and it would say that 4 of the 10 drivers of likelihood to recommend occur before surgery. So now I want to go into a way that you can think differently, and we can actually help you think differently. And this relates to your website and to web leads. Now, all of us have contact us forms on our website, and there's a national metrics about this. Everyone should be able to determine this. What percent of web visitors actually complete a contact us form. And if you say, what's the point of all of our marketing activities and our SEO? What's the manifestation of our success? In my mind, it is the completion of a contact us form. And it is the result of investment and effort. And it is why it's so critically important when we receive one of these forms that we do something with them. And so we want these forms completed, and we want to provide content that increases the likelihood that someone will complete one of these forms. Now, this is the old phrase, word of mouth, and you don't see it so much in this digital age, but I think it's a wonderful thought. What was word of mouth before the internet? What is it in small communities? It's our customer, our patient, our happy patient, hopefully, talking to friends and neighbors about us and about our quality. And there are, in the digital age, I'm going to define a group of things we do as word of mouth activities. And so I want to give you one statistic, which is 1/3 of consumers would never choose a healthcare provider without reading one piece of what the techies called user-generated content, and I'm going to call word of mouth content. So 1 out of 3 of our patients is not going to move forward until they have read this word of mouth content. So what do we call word of mouth content? And I have 3 on my own website, and I'm going to give you a 4th. One of which is patient stories. The second of which is thank you cards. The third of which is where you take, say you're surveying patients, or you have some source of patient comments and you're going and having your web team post those comments on the web. And those comments frequently they're not dated, their source is a little bit questionable because it's not third-party provided. And the last, of course, is what we're doing in Real Patient Ratings, which is we're providing you verified patient comments that can be trusted and are third-party provided. Now, if we look also at how the difficulty of getting all these things onto our websites. I've been doing patient stories in our practice, I think, for at least 5 years. They're incredibly difficult to get there. We have to find a patient who's willing to go public. They have to have a story that we think will be engaging. Then we have to get writers and photo shoots, and we have to get this posted to the web and communicated to our patient base. And I think the minimum cost of this is $1,000 and probably more likely $2,000. But I know they're deeply effective and that patients on our website love to read these stories. Thank you cards. I see a lot of practices do this. They're very charming. Even if you don't go in and read every thank you card, they still send the message that you make your patients happy. But they tend to be relatively short. The handwriting is often difficult to read, and people sort of gaze over this while getting the idea that nice things are being said to you about your patients. And then what we're doing through Real Patient Ratings, it's ongoing content being provided automatically through a widget into your site, and it's new and current. And while I was at ASAPS, I had one arrive, and it was from a malpractice attorney talking about how she chose one of our physicians. And it was a very long comment, and I I looked at it and I thought, there isn't enough money in the world for me to be able to buy or create content like this. It was heartwarming. It was professional and knowledgeable, and patients who read that review will be moved by it. And so this is the word of mouth content. So I'd like to have Eva ask what parts of these you are currently using on your site. Do you have patient stories? Are you posting thank you cards? Do you have either yourself or your web team post content from patient comments that you're able to provide?
So the choices are testimonials, thank you notes, patient stories, nothing, or other. And if you have reviews on your site, that's what I mean by testimonials. So that would have been the right answer for that one. I think we're 50% have voted. We'll leave this open for another 5 seconds maybe. Okay, here we go. I'm going to close that now. And so the results were 60% of our webinar audience is using testimonials or reviews, 40% thank you notes, 20% patient stories, 20% none, and 40% other. So if you said other, will you put in the question box and tell me what you have that fits into that category, and we'll let Marie go on here.
Okay, and for the 20%, I hope you see you're missing a big opportunity here to help you grow your practice. Now, what we did, I'm being a data girl, I wanted to know what was this content doing for the practices. And so we did a study of 14 practices just prior to ASAPs. And so I want to show you, this is Google Analytics. And what we did was we said, okay, let's take all the visits to the website and then let's amalgamate a group of pages that have this word of mouth content. And then let's look to see, is there a difference? Was this a feeling or is it fact that it makes a difference? So what you'll see here is without that word of mouth content, the average number of page visits for this particular practice was 6.73. But when they included those word of mouth pages in their visits, their page views almost tripled. Secondly, their visit to time on site almost tripled from 3.41 minutes to 11.58 minutes. And this is time on the visit is a very important metric to measure the quality of the content that you have on your website. The bounce rate, which says, oops, I got on this page, there's nothing that interests me, I'm gone. The bounce rate was 46% without the word of mouth content and only 5.5% with the word of mouth content. To me, that's one of the most stunning of the statistics. And then lastly, what percent of these visitors went and filled out a contact us form? 2.18, above the national average of 1.5, but up to 3.8 when the word of mouth content was included. So this is what we found in these 14 practices, an increase of 2 to 6 times when the word of mouth content was included. And here's the entire group. Just give you a second to look that over. The smallest increase was 1.43. The largest was 6.49. And then this is looking at their average conversion was that national 1.5. With reviews, it was 4.15. And then the increase in conversions overall was 2.9. So to me, as a numbers person, I find this stunning, very validating, and providing competitive advantage. So how would this work out if we're looking at your practice website? And so what we did here was we said, and you just do the multiplier effect depending on how many visitors you have on your site. But if an average of 10 people contact your practice for information via the website, this is 10 contact us forms, and then publishing reviews and word of the mouth content increases that to 11 per week. And again, you convert those at 15% and you have an average case of 6,000. You can see there's a huge ROI on providing this content. And this is a very conservative estimate. And this allows, when I was first quoting this data at ASAPS, a number of people said, well, some of those people were going to complete a contact us form anyhow. And that's true. But the question we can't, so we've taken the number way down here to only 0.2. And the question also is, would they have filled it out at that moment, that day, or would they have kept thinking about the practice? So, summarize all of this. We have a lot of leads contacting our practice. We're operating on 13% of them as an average. If we can take those leads more seriously, if we can provide better content on our websites, then even getting to a 50% improvement in your ability to take a lead and turn it to surgery is going to bring more patients to your practice and help you in your bottom line. And so this is the little slide we'll use to see if we have questions or any points you would like us to discuss.
I do have a few questions, so if you've got any out there,
okay.
Send them on in. But I've got a few here to start with, Marie. How would you find your email to surgery completion rate? If you didn't, how would you look up that number?
Well, you should be able to have your web person tell you the number of completed contact us forms. And at the roughest way that you would do it is then you would take the number of surgical cases that you did from the internet, and that would give you that ratio. In my own practice, we do about half of our surgeries started as email leads and half of our surgeries start as phone calls. And I take email leads very, very seriously. And because I know that there's serious surgical candidates in those contact us forms.
That's actually very closely related to the next question, which is, how is the behavior of a phone person different from the behavior of an email person? Are there distinct things you can tell us about the way one will behave versus the other?
You know, I'm not quite sure. I do believe, being a professional woman and how many things I do off hours at night or on weekends, that the assumption that I'm not serious because I don't call during business hours is really a false assumption. And certainly we do know that we want to get someone to talk to us as quickly as possible. That's going to heighten the ability to move them forward. But I think that we were actually talking the other day in our office, how many people who ultimately had surgery we did several go rounds of emails with before we actually talked to them. And that was just their preferred style to start with us.
And I like the recommendation that you make about on your contact form asking people directly, do you want to be emailed or called?
Mm-hmm.
because that even
Yes.
further simplifies the process for that patient. Um, One more question back on the drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Somebody would like to have you explain what the system score is and where it came from.
Oh, the system score is the national aggregate of all the doctors in the program, and we have over 200 physicians now that we're surveying for. So when you looked at your individual dashboard, you would see your practice. If you're a solo practice, if you're a group, you would see each doctor plus the group. Then you would see your region, and then the nation is the system score. So it just gives you a way of evaluating how you're doing. And again, I want to stress that most people are doing very, very well, which is why they're it's so wonderful to have all this patient feedback to use to better tell your story. And where you find out that you're missing it here or there, uh, you can go in a very focused way and fix things. You can watch your scores increase and know that patient satisfaction and conversions and referrals are following those changes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all
Mm-hmm.
the questions. Um,
Okay.
we have about 5 more minutes, and that's just enough time for us to do a little overview of how real patient ratings works from the practice side. If you want to stay on for that, um, we'll
Yeah.
keep going. And
And And then one of the things that I think so much of what I'm talking about, taking those leads and converting them to appointments and then to consults, is the patient coordinator's role. And I know we have a number of patient coordinators on this call. And, I just love Karen Zupko's courses for patient coordinators, and you can always go to her website. I'm honored to tell you that she is a huge fan of Real Patient Ratings and recommends to us with great consistency because she believes practices both need to know internally where they're succeeding and where they have opportunities, and then she sees the value of this content being published to help the individual practice sites. So her endorsement means a lot. So this is looking at a presentation that we would do to someone who was considering our services, and it's on the themes of things that I've already discussed with you today, starting with that opinion from your own patients, knowing where you stand regionally and nationally, internally, making changes, being willing to listen to that feedback and to make changes that will help you, increasing scheduling, increasing repeat business. And then this gets into a little more of the details of what we do. Each of our members has a profile on Real Patient Ratings, and we put a feed there with the members' approval only. Uh, we ultimately go to what a 5-star feed that we code to Google that gives you an average rating along with the number of reviews approved by your patients. And those ratings and reviews are very strong. I can't think of anyone who's under a 4.4, which is an A rating. And whereas if you go off to RateMD or Yelp or Vitals or any of these other sites, the average rating is under 4. It's 3.9, which would be about a C plus. And that's because they have non-patients, they have former employees, there's lots of ways to game their systems that are very negative for real practices. And what happens then, because of our credibility with Google, and we have huge trust with Google, um, that directory profile is coming up on a search for any of our members. And 96% of our members have the RPR profile and the rating showing on a page 1 of a Google search. And that is all wonderful, but I think the more compelling thing that we do is we provide content for your website. And we provide in what's called indexable content that is seen by Google as new content arriving on your website. It's highly valued content. And so what then happens is that in that same review search, our members' own websites are also now appearing from the content that we've provided. And as far as I know, we are the only site who is providing this indexable content. And there may be someone else doing, but I certainly know that we are one of very few. And so having your own website appear on a review search then means you have a good chance that that patient who's considering you is going to click on your own website and come there to read about you and to understand your quality and fill out, we hope, a contact us form. And you've seen this slide. And this is the reference I made to plasticsurgery.org. They are allowing our members to post their ratings and reviews on their enhanced profile on plasticsurgery.org, the first specialty in medicine to do so. And we are in discussions with ASAPs to provide the content to surgery.org as well, because we want consumers to find this content, because we know, regardless of where they are, because we know it increases likelihood to complete a form and choose a plastic surgeon. And we have, you can extend the effects if you have TouchMD. There's a feed of our ratings into the TouchMD session, so that when your patient goes home to access that session, that that content is there in case they missed it somewhere along the way. And we have, you know, really happy practices. Our conversion rate from initial membership to renewal is well over 90%. And so it just becomes an ongoing part of the practice's strategy, having their patients help them tell their story to consumers in a trusted and authentic way. And Eva, you might want to talk about this. This is if you are interested in joining RPR, then what we're offering is that you pay for 10 months and receive 13 months of service, and the fee is $195 per month, so it's $19.50 for 13 months of service. And if you're interested in that, you can just go to realpatientratings.com/join, and there's a form a web form you can complete. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you regard this as beneficial. And naturally, being survey people, we're going to survey you and ask for your feedback and your ideas for what we can do to make these even more useful.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.